This is the best job in the world. I would never complain about this job, even though it's pretty long hours.
Yep.
But it's great. I mean, every day it's like having a very complex puzzle to figure out.
Hello, it's Warren Huart here. We're in Portland, Maine. It is really, really cold. Why are we here? Well, we just left sunny Los Angeles and it was warm and it was sunny. We've flown out here to meet two rather wonderful people. Actually, a whole combination of wonderful people, but two very wonderful people. Mr. Adam Ayen, a very good friend of mine, great mastering engineer, and the legend himself, Mr. Bob Ludwig, the mastering engineer's mastering engineer. So here we are at Gateway Mastering. Let's get in and interview and talk to these two wonderful gentlemen. It's bleeding freezing. Hello everybody, hope you're doing marvellously well. I'm with Bob Ludwig. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Very well.
Thank you ever so much for making time in your incredibly busy schedule.
You're really welcome. I'm sorry that you had to be here on the coldest day of the season so far. So,
Well, I grew up with, variable weather coming from England, but poor old Eric, who's sitting behind the camera there, is a born and bred LA native.
ooh, tough.
And at 24 years old, he'd never seen snow before.
Well, it's about time, is all I can say.
Although it's like compacted ice at the moment.
Yes,
like-
it's just pretty treacherous walking out there. So
Speaking of which, so obviously, not obviously, but you're a New Yorker originally?
I was born in Savannah, Georgia. And then after the first year, I moved up to Westchester County, just north of New York City. And so I was there until fourth grade, and then we moved to Upper Westchester County. In fact, where my mentor, Phil Ramone, used to live before he passed away. And so I was there, and then I went to the Eastman School of Music in Rochester, New York. So I was there for 5 years. I was working on my master's degree there as well. And when I was finishing up my master's degree, there was a recording. I was in the recording department from as early as I could possibly be there. And there was this jazz program during the summer session, and it had to be recorded, and they wanted it to be improved, and so they hired Phil Ramone to come up to teach this recording workshop. And when I was his kind of de facto assistant, and one of my goals as a trumpet player was to play the Bach B minor Mass with a really high, piccolo trumpet. And I was also in the Utica Symphony. I was a principal trumpet player in the Utica, New York Symphony.
Wow.
And one day they said, "Oh, we're going to do the B minor Mass for Christmas." I was like, I wasn't waiting to do this quite yet. I thought it'd be about 10 years from now in my career, my trumpet playing career, that I'd be doing that. But it was great. Eastman loaned me their piccolo trumpet for a month, and my teacher and I did nothing but play the piccolo trumpet for the month. And I performed it twice. It was broadcast on the radio. Everybody loved it. And
Amazing.
when it was over, I was like, now what am I going to do? That was my goal that I already set. So when we were finishing the recording workshop, and Phil asked me if I wanted to come work for him at the end. And I was thinking and when I was in high school, I couldn't decide if I wanted to be an engineer or a musician. And thank God my musical teacher and my high school taught me into going to Eastman, because believe me, you can pick up engineering for this kind of stuff, but to know that kind of music the way that I know it, and my master's was in music literature, so I know tons of music literature. It's really wonderful. At any rate, that's how I got into it. And so I was working with Phil for a year at A&R Recording, and he, Elliot Shiner was there within a few weeks, and Shelley Yakis also.
Very good friend of mine.
Yes, Shelley and I started within 1 week of each other.
Wow.
Yeah. So, so I've known Shelley and Els a long time. And I was going to say, so I was there, and everything, all the people that started to work for Phil had to learn how to cut discs because, like, since 1974, this isn't really true so much, but before that, discs were really limited in how things could be, what could be put onto it. I started with a fixed pitch lathe where you have a gear ratio and you set it to 105 lines per inch or 130 lines per inch. And with those systems, if the bass was too loud, it would literally cross over the groove next to it. So you had to learn how to do that. However, I was somehow genetically predisposed to mastering. And so I never got out of that room there. So A&R was the first independent studio to have the Neumann analog computer lathe, the VMS 66, I think it was. And Steve Temmer, who imported the lathes into this country, I guess kept the manual, whatever. Nobody could quite figure it out. So Phil locked myself and Aaron Barron, one of his maintenance men, into the room and said, "Don't come out of there until you got this thing figured out." And
Nice.
so we figured out how to do it. One thing that was really kind of cool was in order for it just was never aligned quite right. But we had the Scully preview deck with the advance head and then the playback head. And I found out that if you lowered it, the preview, the thing would cut a lot better and it looked just about right. The fact is that if the lathe was aligned properly, none of this would have happened. But anyway, this turned out to be a good thing because the word got around town that Ludwig cheats the preview on the lathe and cuts hotter. That kind of, so it was like a marketing thing that I didn't even realize it was. But in retrospect, it was like people were saying that all the time, right? So, and because I knew how to read scores from Eastman, record companies like None Such started working with A&R recording, and
oh wow!
So I could cut their discs, and I cut all of the None Such catalog when Tracy Stern was there, and then when the other people I've still done work for them, and I still do work for them now. We just did a Katie Lang thing, and we did a Steve Reich Pulse record. So I've done quite a lot of, almost all of Steve Reich's stuff for None Such I've mastered. So I learned how to cut records really well, and then I started, after a year and a half there, this brand new cutter head that Georg Neumann himself, not even his team, but Georg Neumann had his own little lab in his factory. And one day he came out with the SX68 cutting head, which was like going from 7.5 to 30 ips. It was a major advance in cutting technology. And so he came out with this, and I was the first person in the Western Hemisphere to try this. Steve Temmer came and said, "Here, put this on the lathe," and we put it up and aligned it, and was like, "Oh my God, this is amazing." And for whatever reason, not Phil, but the management of A&R didn't want to spend the money for this thing. And I was going like, "Oh man, I don't care how good I am. I could never compete with this quantum leap in technology." So there was this brand new company that was going to open up with not only the SX68 cutter head, but the new solid state cutting amps that Neumann had, and Studer tape machines and Telefunken M10As. And that was called Sterling Sound. And I became their first employee. So,
wow.
Yeah. And eventually became vice president there. And I guess I'm talking about my flow of my career. At one point, Sterling Sound was sold to a public company called OCG Technology. And then that company we're at 110 West 57th Street on the top floor. And below that was Mercury Records Studios. And then on the fourth floor was Mercury Records cutting rooms. And so they bought that. So they owned 2 cutting rooms, and they renamed that other one Masterdisc. So at one point, the Lee and Joe, who owned Sterling Sound, I don't know, they got paranoid, whatever. They asked me to sign this employment contract that was it would be so illegal nowadays,
Sure.
Anyway, I was very hurt by that because I felt I gave them everything I could to, get the studio established. And so I ended up moving over to Masterdisc and was
the next floor down.
2 floors down.
Two floors down.
3 floors down,
Okay.
from the 7th to the 4th. Yeah. So yeah, that was quite something. Yeah.
Must have been some awkward elevator moments.
Yeah. Well, that whole thing went down when Lee and Joe decided to buy the company back. So it became private with them once again. So yeah, so it was that was pretty crazy. So, and then through the years, I've always wanted to have my own place, and Masterdisc moved from 110 to they moved over by the American Bible Society and Atlantic Records in New York by Broadway, and then we moved to West 45th Street, and I just became not happy with the way my rooms were. I felt my rooms were getting worse rather than better, and so I really investigated starting my own place, and I found a great business partner, Bob Clearmountain's then manager, Dan Crew, who still lives here in Portland, helped me with a great business plan to get the place started and not make any crazy mistakes. The only thing, just like with any new business, you have to work 7 days a week for about a year, to make sure you have enough cash flow. But at any rate, he really did a great job with that. And then early on, we parted ways, and so I'm the sole owner of the company now, and it's been great. And when we had our business plan leaving New York, we figured that maybe only 40% of people that went and attended sessions in New York would come here. Up until the record companies collapsed because of Napster and became a third of the size it was, and budgets went down. Up until then, we had more people attend sessions than I did in New York, it was a total surprise. Lots of people came up here, and it was really great. And still a lot of people do, but it's not like 3 times a week anymore, that kind of thing. So, but it's wonderful. So, and I've never regretted ever moving here. It's just wonderful. I just love it, even when it's cold. I got it. If you're someone from LA and you don't dig the cold, and that's cool, but I like it.
I think Eric's having the adventure of coming to see the cold, and we're going to go out and have some Maine lobster tonight.
That's great. Yeah,
can't get better than that with Adam, of course.
Yeah. Well, I hear you're going to Street and Company, which is one of the best restaurants here.
I know. I'm very excited.
Yeah.
I love the cold. Maybe not all the time. That's why I love to move to LA. And it's interesting because when I was asked by the record label whether I wanted to fly out with first of all, because it was tapes. And I think there's probably also that reality as well, is like you don't really want to ship a whole ton of tapes. And if some guy's willing to come out and babysit and be part of it, I was extremely excited to come out. And
Good.
So, yeah, and what an adventure. I remember flying, it was like a little hopper though. When we came in this time, we flew through South Carolina, and it was like some kind of Airbus. But the last time I did it was a little tiny Embraer.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That's
improved a lot.
Yeah, that's improved.
It's all jets now, but
all jets. Yep.
But back when we were doing the Pilgrim record for Eric Clapton, it was so funny because it was long ago enough that he flew to New York on the Concorde, right?
Wow.
And then got on one of these puddle jumpers to here, That was back when there was mad cow disease in the UK. I don't know if you remember that.
Of course, remember it very well. Yeah.
So there's nobody getting cheeseburgers there. And when Eric got in the door and said hello, first words was, "Where can I get a really good cheeseburger?"
Yep, we had one last night. Yeah.
And there was a place called Ruby's that made all organic, meat hamburgers, and they thought they were the best in the world. And to me, they tasted like the best I'd ever had. And so I said to Eric, "What do you think about this? They say that's the best in the world." He says, "I think they're tied for best in the world." He says, "There's something out in LA called the Fat Burger or something like that. It's the antithesis of it. It's just like grease and onions and blah,
Yeah.
But he said, but they're both great,
Yeah.
So.
Fat burgers are, I don't know. I never thought of Fat Burger like that. That's quite, I mean, they're good, but yes.
Mm-hmm.
Hey. But I suppose it's an acquired taste. I mean, burgers in America is a whole different level. When you come from England and you come here, and it's an art form here.
You're right. Yeah, absolutely.
It's totally art form. I must say, I've been in a lot of mastering studios. I would say yours is might well be the most well-equipped studio I've been in.
Oh, thanks.
You have a lot of choice. Now, there's a couple of other guys. I don't want to get into a big fight here with people, but in general, you have a lot of equipment. I suppose I'm going to ask you, because everybody probably asks you this question, how much are you now analog versus digital? What's your sort of process? Or is it varying from song to song, album to album?
Well, I would say it's pretty much album to album. It really does depend on what needs to be done. It depends on, I think just like with you, as you're producing and mixing, you get like this groove, like you have this image in your brain of what you think the thing ought to sound like. And you're just working heuristically to try to make it sound like it does in your brain. And that's the same thing here. And if I, it's been very interesting to see, like for years, like when when I first started working with Pro Tools back at Masterdisc, we did something and it was supposed to be, they would say it would be a perfect clone of like, whatever you put on it would come back out, and it wasn't. And so he called up, was it Brooks Evans, who was the founder, and told him that what we'd found, and he called back and said, yeah, you're right. And so they changed the code. This is way back when it was just starting. So they've had that part right for a long time now.
That's great.
Anyway, so, when the first plugins came in, it was just, I remember when the first digital EQ came in, when we started working in digital at Masterdisc in 1978. The first thing I cut was from a SoundStream digital machine that Tom Stockham had designed. And we did, I think it was a Bolero for Telarc Records. Yeah, it was very cool. Anyway, when we had a Sony, it was JVC made a digital equalizer, and it wasn't very good. And Sony made one that was like, if you put like one notch of 10K, you'd go like, I think it's better just flat, that kind of thing. Digital EQs sounded really bad until Daniel Weiss from Weiss Engineering started making the oversampled EQs that he made. And now, as you know, it was just a slow progression. Like for a long time, you wouldn't think of working in the box because it was so bad sounding. And then as, it got better, and then they got into 32-bit floating point. And then they got into people that really, instead of taking their EQ out of some manual that had existed since 1950, because, the theory behind digital was pretty well set by the late 30s, really. It was just a matter of time to get the computer speed up where you could do music in real time. Anyway, instead of taking it out of some engineering book that people really thought and listened to it, and, like Bruce Jackson at Apogee designed filters for Sony machines and Mitsubishi machines so that they would sound a lot better because they had a good handle on that. They had their UV22 dither that was the first people to really concentrate on that and make that great. And then as the plugins finally kept evolving, you'd go like, oh, hey, that's a pretty good one, and I think I'll use that. And after a while, like for the digital maximizers, there was really nothing in the analog domain that could do that quite like they did that. So pretty soon you'd be doing everything analog at the end. You'd be a hybrid situation, go into digital at the end, just to use one or two plugins that there was no correlation for in the analog domain. And then as you get where I'm coming with this, it just got better and better and better. And now there's so many good plugins, and the math behind the coding of the consoles internally is so much better. You can, easily do things completely in the box. And I think a lot of it is a function of like, if I get a mix like from someone like Bob Clearmountain, who's like probably the world's greatest mixer, his stuff is so close to begin with, and he knows, like Bob doesn't care for analog tape because it comes out of his console exactly like he wants it. And if it's not that, he doesn't think it sounds good. And analog tape is usually not that. It's usually warmer, i.e. muddier, and or with a bass hump, or something like that. So what he sends me is really, really good. And so doesn't need much usually, and you don't have to. And at one time, this was a huge problem, having to go into the analog domain, work with it, and then re-encode it into the digital domain again. So with his was some of this first stuff I would do entirely in the box because it was good. But then, George Massenburg had the MDW equalizer, and Oxford started coming out with some great stuff, and some other the Fab people in France, really good stuff. That is really great. And there's now a lot of things, and especially noise reduction. Like when I was at Masterdisc, we were the first studio in the East Coast to own a Sonic Solutions. We had the first digital DAW. Actually, the very first digital DAW is considered to be Tom Stockham's SoundStream computer that he built to do editing in Utah. But after that, the Sonic Solutions was, and they were the first people that they developed no noise. Andy Moore at Sonic was the guy that developed no noise, and it was very cool because I remember at one time Tom Stockham had come to Masterdisc and we were doing something for New World Records, and there was some engineers must have been asleep at the wheel, like it was this mass, and every time the choir got loud, it would distort, and so they never released it. And then so Tom Stockham was there, and he was talking on the phone with Andy Moore, and Andy Moore would send us code updates, and it was back on the 3.5-inch floppy disks back then. So he'd put it in, and we'd have this new software and try it. And pretty soon he developed a way to clean up that distortion so it could be released, which was quite an amazing thing. I mean,
incredible.
Yeah, I mean, like before, there's nothing remotely like that in history. So, again, all those no noise things are things that are really only exist in the digital domain.
Do you also find, I know from a mixing perspective, what I like about digital is I can get really detailed with EQ.
Oh, completely. Yeah. Jeff Balding and Don Henley were here we were working on a solo album.
I love Jeff.
Yeah, Cask Country,
Yeah.
or County, I guess it is, yeah.
He's so talented.
Yeah,
Such
very,
a nice
very
guy,
talented.
yeah.
Anyway, this is something that they'd been, as you can imagine, Don and Jeff were just, beating this thing over and over and over again, refining it. And so we found it was the first time that you could easily hear tenth of a dB stuff, which I always thought was not true. I knew that years ago, Clear Mountain worked with this thing with the Indigo Girls, and normally the mixes are like mix 6 or 4 or whatever. And I get these, I'm loading it in, and it's like mix 31 and 40. I'm like, what happened? Oh yeah, we beat Bob to death, and they say the vocal's still not right. And the Indigo Girls have got ears like I'm really amazing. And I'll tell you a Frank Zappa story that's maybe even more amazing, but they've got very amazing ears. And so they were saying like, oh, the vocal's still not right. It's not right. And so I'd used George's MDW EQ and the TC M5000, and I took 1.6K and I raised it 0.6 of a dB, and it was Emily. Yeah, she said, yeah, now it sounds right. I'm going, maybe it's too much, so I went to, it was 0.2 on there, and she could reliably tell when it was in or out. I mean, it was really quite amazing.
That's amazing.
So digital, because the impulse response isn't smeared by all the analog tape, which is a positive for some things, but not for everything. But because the impulse response is so strong with digital, you can get so finely detailed, So, people always talk about tape versus digital being better, but I can make a digital recording of your tape that you wouldn't be able to tell which was which, but you can never make what's the other way around?
Yes.
A tape of something digital and not know which was which, There you go. But the best ears that I worked with is still Frank Zappa. Years ago, he called up Masterdisc and said, I need a week to master my record. This is the Shake Your Booty that Joe Ciccarelli mixed. Very well mixed too.
One of my favorite records, City of Tiny Lights.
Yes.
What a great record.
I remember at the end I told Frank, I says, I think I've worked on a masterpiece, but I can't play it for my mom.
Oh, yeah. Bobby, what is it?
Bobby Brown.
Bobby Brown. Cutest little boy. Take about an hour on a Tower of Power. And
Yeah, exactly.
A little golden shower.
Yes.
Do we have to edit that lyric out?
Yeah. It was great. Anyway.
There's definitely a lot. I actually played that in my art class when I was at school.
Oh, great.
Double album. Amazing album. Everybody check out Show Your Beauty. And I had girls like upset with me. How dare you pay this? This is sexist. And it's like, you know. I got into a lot of trouble.
Yeah, it's Frank.
It's Frank Zappa.
Yeah, I'd have to listen to it with 2019 ears and see if some of those lyrics are just too horrible. But,
there's no PC.
Not at all. But some amazing guitar playing. Holy cow.
Yeah, guitar playing, and then sorry to go on this tangent, but then there's tracks where he's got like a bass line. The bass line's in 4/4 and the drums are in 7/4.
Yeah,
it's years since I've thought about it, but and he took two different performances and just stick them together, and it's just incredible stuff.
Yeah, really amazing. Now most of that album is from live performances that were all overdubbed and just turned into whatever. So it's just amazing. Anyway, at Masterdisc we had a similar setup here. I had my lathes here, double lathes, two lathes I would operate simultaneously. My console was here, a client sofa there, and then the speakers. And Frank was there in front of me. And when he said he wanted a week, it's like we said, nobody needs a week. He says, oh, I need a week. And so we gave him like 3 days or something like that. And great as Joe Ciccarelli's mixes were on this, and it was amazing. He had this idea in his head for it to sound like the way you hear it sounding now. And there was just like so many moves, you know, like even single words, and it was just unbelievable. Anyway, in order to even cut a reference disc, I had to like memorize all these moves because you couldn't read the card by the time it's like, oh, let's see, 1K plus 2, like 3 moves would have gone by then, you know, that kind of thing. So I was doing a practice run, and I was doing all these moves and everything, and there was, I knew that I'd gotten everything absolutely right. And there was this Neumann equalizer, which I could get out and show you, or you can make a still of it and take a picture of it, whatever. And it had sharp, medium, and broad for the bandwidths of the different EQs. And the EQ was 250 hertz minus 2 dB, and it was supposed to be medium. And at this one place in this song, it came, and I just hit it really fast, and it popped up into the sharp instead of the medium. And this is just 2 dB at 250 hertz, sharp versus medium. And Frank raises his hand and says, something doesn't sound quite right there. And I said, you're right. That's the first time I missed something. Backed up the tape and put it to medium. He goes, that's better. We continued on.
I love that story.
But I mean, like that was something. Oh, sorry, Mike.
That's all right.
You're okay, Eric? That was really a mind blower for me, you know. And so,
an insane talent.
Yeah,
Insane
it was
talent.
really fantastic. So I got
what a masterpiece of a record. 3 days.
Yeah,
I'm going to go back and listen to it with reviewed enthusiasm, knowing that you spent 3 days mastering it.
Yeah, I don't know if it's up there anymore, but when Gail Zappa was alive, I used to work with her estate, and we remastered the Shake Your Booty record. And I remembered in my brain all these things that we did. And so there's probably a high resolution version of it available right now. So
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, so it's great.
I live in Laurel Canyon, so I'm.
You're right there.
Frank's house is at the bottom of my street.
Oh my gosh,
house, yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. No, I love that. I remember being in England and looking at these albums and being like, I have to be in America. I have to be in I have to be around this.
Have to be up the street.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful. That's such a wonderful record. So I'd like to do a little bit of gear talk, if you don't mind, because I know people like a bit.
Yeah.
I think probably the speakers are, I was joking when I came in that I thought I have seen them before, obviously, but still that first impression when you come in, it looks like 2001 Space Odyssey. I mean, these are pretty massive.
Yeah, they
And
weigh almost 800 pounds a piece. Yeah,
800 pounds.
yeah.
So so you got two different ATRs. You've obviously got 1 inch and ½ inch.
Yes.
What's this?
This
complete
is
different section.
Tim DeParavicini's Esoteric Audio Research tube playback amps. And this head has two different playback heads, so you can align this, and then at the bottom is the Aria Class A solid state, discrete solid state amps, playback amps.
Nice.
And so you can align them both and then just flip back and forth between them and see what you like. And of course,
oh, fantastic.
the problem is that the producer usually says, "Can you give me the base of the tube with the top of the solid state?" And I go, "No, we can't do that." But they're really good. In fact, we just did the new Mark Knopfler record. That's really wonderful. It's done at British Grove Studios. It's one of the world's best studios. And that was all mixed to 1 inch tape, completely analog. And that was reproduced with these tube amplifiers. So
that's incredible.
It sounds really great. Yeah.
Amazing. And then there's a ½ inch here.
Yeah. And then out in the hallway, we have a 2 inch 8-track when we were doing a lot of the surround sound for DTS CDs and the Super Audio CD disc and surround. Quite a few projects would come in on that 2 inch 8-track. There we go, 2 inch 8-track.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and we use 6 of the tracks, of course, right?
Wow.
And yeah, we did. There was a Queen. I think it was Night at the Opera. Came off of that.
That is actually my favorite record.
Yeah, and and the Roy Orbison Black and White Night concert. I don't know if you know that one.
Yeah,
that was really great. And then right now, the machine out in the hall is modified for 1 inch.
Yep.
And so when I've been working with Jack White on Blunderbuss and Lazaretto, he wanted to have the vinyl cut from with no digital involved whatsoever, not even a pedal. So he and Lance usually mix the records and they sent it to me on 1 inch. And then so I would master in the analog domain from the 1 inch to the other 1 inch. And that's what they would cut from. So it was mastered, but with no digital in there anywhere. So
amazing.
Yeah.
So some GML EQs.
Yes. So when you're up at Adam's room, his room is based on the same ratios as this room, which are excellent, except because he's up on a mezzanine and there's rock right beneath him. It's not as tall or as wide or as long, but we have both basically the same gear, except this room is designed for surround. Like right now, we only listen to the left and right speakers here. Everything else you see is just for surround sound. And we have speakers in the rear closets that come up, they roll out for the 5.1. So this room, and so Adam always, when we have a 5.1 project, he'll come down here and
I see,
and work here because this room is really set up for it. So so we have 6 channels of GML EQ, which is really good for precision work. It has a sharp Q on it, and it's just a really transparent equalizer. Like if this was set to 0 and just you pressed in and out, you'd have a hard time telling that it was in the circuit. And then on the other side of the coin are these tube Manley massive passive equalizers, 6 channels of that. And with this, you could tell if it was in bypass, if it was in the circuit or not.
Right.
It's got a sound of its own, which is what we're looking for often. And this is great for just coloring, tone painting, overall impressions.
If I was to generalize, would that be something that came in specifically very digital and you wanted to add some?
For sure, yeah. If something suffered from what we would call digititis.
Digititis?
Yeah. Yes, we would definitely use that. And even if the thing was EQ'd pretty properly, we might even put it through that and bypass.
Oh, I see.
Just to use the iron and the tubes from that.
Right.
So it was really good. And then down here we have 6 channels of the Millennia Twin Com, which is both solid state and tube. And then 6 channels of the SSL. And done a couple of specialized gear, like our console's made by SPL in Germany, Sound Performance Laboratory. And this is the SPL is the only company I know of that uses 120 volt DC rails. So this thing will not distort. It will not do it because it's got so much
juice, so much power,
yeah. So both Adams has the 2-channel version of this, and this is the 8-channel version of the SPL console.
Amazing.
And this is an equalizer they make that if I had turned it on in advance, you could see it's motorized. So if you turn one, it'll move both of them at the same time.
Amazing.
And the idea behind that is that you would buy 6 channels of this and only use the front plate here, and you'd move this, and 6 channels of your remote analog EQ would be moving. But we didn't have to go that far, that unfortunately, which is good because those are very expensive. So.
And you got the Weiss, you were talking about that earlier?
Yes. Yeah, we have the both the equalizers and the their compressor.
The compressor down there, I see.
Yeah, which is also over here is 6 channels of their de-esser. So
wow, I mean, an insane amount of equipment here you're using. Is there any particular clocking that you like, or you have a preference?
Yeah, we have the Antelope.
The Antelope.
Yeah. Yeah, we used to use other clocking, and then we ended up with the Antelope. And so we have one atomic clock that feeds my Trinity here and Adam's Trinity from the same clock. So.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, it's good. So yeah, when I hardly ever run out of things in my brain that I need to when I'm mastering, I envision how it should sound, and then figure out what knobs to move to make it sound like it does in my head. And I seldom run out of gear. But a lot of times I will, we have a storeroom that has some older gear.
Yep.
And I'll think, boy, that thing in there is just what I need, so
right.
We'll go and do that.
And then you've got guys like Jack White who are very specific.
Yeah.
So they come in with a vision. They're like, we need this, this, and this.
Yeah. So that's great, So,
that sounds like fun. It keeps the job interesting. You're not like,
this is the best job in the world. I would never complain about this job, even though it's pretty long hours.
Yep.
But it's great. I mean, every day it's like having a very complex puzzle to figure out, and
do you have a monitoring level that is going to like preserve your ears for the day?
Oh yeah.
What do you think about
I
that?
monitor 85 dB. Some of the flash peaks might be a little bit louder, but not much.
Yep.
And you're allowed to have about 8 hours of exposure of that a day.
Right.
And like I never ever walk out of here with my ears ringing or anything like that. So yeah, in fact and I can't go to rock concerts without earplugs.
Sure.
It's just not in the game to do that. So
it is great that rock concerts have got so much better since they started using digital consoles. Have you noticed that how sonically now it's so much more controlled?
Yeah.
Because guys are going away and mixing the show. They're recording the show, then going back and mixing it, and then coming back and all the moves are programmed in. There's a lot more. I've noticed a massive improvement over the last 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, I think the Grammys live sound people kind of pioneered that.
Oh, they did?
Yeah.
Yep.
So they would record the rehearsal and then do a mix and then put it up for the show. It's great.
That's amazing.
Our studio, the conceptual design for my room, like as I was saying, one of the reasons I left New York was, I wasn't happy with my rooms and I wanted to do something really right. And so I was talking with Dr. Peter D'Antonio from RPG Diffusers that make the diffusers in the back of the room. Like what's the best possible sound we can get? And that would have been 1992 when we were designing everything. And so he came up with this conceptual design and had all the right ratios. This is built on some Loudon, an acoustician named Loudon has this ratio that the room is built on. And one of the things he wanted to do was to isolate the speaker from the floating floor so that the sound wasn't transmitted through the wooden floor. So this is like the floating floor, and that's the concrete that goes around the speaker. And when we were doing it, we asked him how much leeway should we give ourselves? He says, well, 6 inches. But when he gave us the dimensions from the wall and from the back wall, side wall and back wall, where to place the tweeter, and we put it exactly where he said to put it, and turned up the monitoring pot, and I'd never heard anything sound that good in my life. And so I think he tried moving it around, and I think he really nailed it. So it was,
And these are on at the moment.
yeah, these are on.
And they're like almost completely silent.
Mm-hmm.
Insane.
And it's fed by these dual bridge cello Mark II performance amplifiers. That'll put out like 4,000 watts into 1 ohm. You could probably weld with those if you wanted to.
That's amazing. So where are these made? Eggleston Works.
Oh, this is made by Bill Eggleston. His dad, Bill Eggleston III, his dad, William Eggleston, is the father of modern color photography. If you go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York or the Museum of Modern Art in New York, there's always William Eggleston color prints. And just like his dad, this is from Memphis. And but the speakers, this is Dyne Audio woofer, Dyne Audio Esitar tweeter, and these are Morel mid-range drivers, which is really cool. And then we use transparent audio cable. If you look in the back there, there's a thing that looks like a tiny little vacuum cleaner, which is a transparent audio speaker cable, which does impedance matching between the amp and the speaker, and it's really pretty amazing. When we got this SPL console, we had to take the whole room down. We took it down to the floating floor and rewired it with. We already had transparent audio cable. We rewired it with new transparent cable because their table technology had advanced in the time since we had it, and clients like I'd been working on the Rolling Stones reissues back then, and Jody Klein, the head of ABCO, came to my room after the change, and he couldn't believe the difference in the sound. It was just from the rewiring and the console and things like that.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's cool stuff.
I remember being in this room with the Frey record and just being like, I'd not heard the record like that.
Yeah, a lot of people. And they'll hear
once
noises.
in a lifetime experience.
I'll hear noises on mixes that they'd worked on for a long time and never heard. And,
I remember the low end. I remember remember hearing like some extra low in the vocal that I was like, oh, we should have just bypassed it just a little tiny bit more.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'd never heard it like that, and I've never heard it again like that since.
But the good news is you probably have so much experience with the speakers you use that probably don't do that anymore, that problem.
No, exactly. I've said this many, many times before. I've learned more from mastering engineers about my mixes than anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They'll be like, oh, you've got a little 150 bump. And you're like, what is that? Why do I have that?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And you're like, thank you ever so much.
My pleasure.
We're going to go and talk to Adam.
Great.
So that's going to be fantastic as well.
Excellent. Good. Yeah.
So, and I met Adam because of working with you.
Yes.
We came here, did something, I went upstairs and hung out with him. And
yeah, Adam's amazing. I mean, he's been here quite a while now, and he was so mature. Even the very first time, the first years he was here, it was just always amazing. Like, wow, you're really that centered, and together, and he is. It's great.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So thank you ever so much for sharing your time with us and allowing us to come here.
Oh, you're welcome.
It's nice though. Look, I'm sitting here with a shirt on, and meanwhile, it's about minus whatever outside.
It's great. I know.
Freezing. It's beautiful.
Good. Thanks
ever
again.
so much.
All right.